This is the creature we use for what aquarium enthusiasts might call a walking fish, or a Mexican walking fish. Hello, I'm Shafiq, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the secrets that axolotl owners have been keeping in their tanks. And one of those secrets pertains to transportation, or as it's known in the axolotl world, moving your smiley water dragon. It means the same thing. And of course, as a certified YouTube sensation and axolotl aficionado, I've done my fair bit of axolotl relocation. Right? Just off the top of my head, I've moved axolotls from pet stores to homes, from one tank to another, and even across state lines. So I know what I'm talking about. But when it comes to transporting these adorable amphibians, whether you're just looking for a quick tank clean or a cross-country move, it is worth learning that moving an axolotl isn't necessarily the same as relocating your average goldfish. And so without further ado, let's metaphorically dip our toes into the cool waters of axolotl transportation as I uncover ways to safely move your aquatic friend from point A to point B. You know, when I was out there for the first time on the American open road, living the axolotl lifestyle on my way to a reptile expo, the first confusing thing that I noticed is that axolotls in transit, and as it turns out everywhere else, insist upon being kept cool to what they would be in their home aquarium. Sarah, what do you mean by that? Well, here's how axolotl transportation works. We'll get into terminology later. In their home tank, axolotls prefer a temperature between 60 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. When you're transporting them, you need to maintain this temperature range. Nobody would ever want their axolotl to get too warm, or no too cold either, and you get my drift. In America, I don't know why my hand is still up there. In America, it's a little bit different because that same temperature range where I keep my axolotl happy and healthy in its home tank and ask it if it wants some bloodworms, and it actually knows what bloodworms are, is crucial during transport. So the container immediately housing your axolotl should be insulated, and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5 steps to ensure safe transport. And then I'm a little bit hazy after that. And then you get to your destination. And this is where those pan-aquatic differences really take shape, or should I say size? Because there's one key rule. On the whole, axolotl transport containers tend to be smaller than their home aquariums. And the reason for this, as we all know, is that America marginally outsizes Britain in terms of roads, but it's also because axolotls are sensitive to motion and smaller containers reduce water sloshing. And so we just sort of cram things in fact, awkwardly. A tiny transport container was where I first moved my axolotl. And it was about the size of this studio, which surprisingly, given that I'm often dubbed America's finest axolotl expert, is not that big. And at the best of times, I don't like being in close proximity to stressed amphibians. Being squashed in a car with a potentially unhappy axolotl was the second most horrifying experience of my life. And I know what you're thinking. Ooh, Sarah, what was the first? Being squashed in the elevator with it on the way up to my new apartment. But the next time we moved, we sure did have a chuckle. At least I think we did. I couldn't hear them because they were on the other side of the room in their new spacious tank. You see, axolotl home tanks, like cars or Porsche sizes, or America itself, are just bigger. I mean, they'd have to be, right? Especially given what we've discovered on this channel about the differences in axolotl sizes. And of course, a tank is not the only place where you'd keep an axolotl. In addition to the tank, the transport container, and in desperate times, the bathtub, which should prompt nobody to ask me about the shower curtain incident of 2018, there is also the breeding tank. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, Sarah, the British axolotl tank has separate filters for mechanical and biological filtration. Well, firstly, that's not always true. And secondly, that's not where I was going with this. I was actually going to mention the water quality. Because while in America, the tap water and the ideal axolotl water are more or less the same in terms of parameters, this is often not the case in Britain. To go from tap water to axolotl safe water, you often have to kind of treat it because the chlorine levels are higher up than what's safe for axolotls. There's one thing to remember: there's setting up a tank, but transporting an axolotl when your water isn't safe, it could lead to an unintentionally hilarious TikTok video. In fact, I do have footage, but I can't show it on here because I get hundreds of complaints and an equal number of axolotl adoption requests. So just take my word for it. Water testing kits are of course found in many places and through much of our daily lives as axolotl owners, but never more do I need them than when I'm transporting my axolotl. So because of this, it is worth remembering some of the key differences between home tank water and transport water. Don't take my word for it. Instead, listen to me from last year. It was once said by me in just a second from now that you can tell a lot about an axolotl's health by the quality of its water. And given its unparalleled record of boasting larger gills than everyone else, America might fancy its chances of winning the My Axolotl's gills are bigger than your axolotl's gills debate. But the truth is, and you might find this shocking, British axolotls often have larger gills. You can't talk about axolotl transport without talking about stress. Stress is the invisible enemy that keeps the axolotl from feeling attached to its new environment like a docked boat. And the only reason I made a nautical sim there was to draw your attention to the miniature pirate ship I made from axolotl tank decorations while I was bored. Anyway, there are several key differences in this department. On British axolotl transport containers, the lids are ever so slightly more secure and crucially airtight. This makes them sturdier and impossible to accidentally open. How do I know that? Because I was 14 once and tried to transport my first axolotl in a leaky container. But whereas British axolotl transport containers, that is type G containers, are decidedly triple sealed, that's not always the case in America. Sure, type B containers, the ones whose lids look like surprised ghosts, definitely do have 3 seals. But type A containers, which are easily the more outgoing and competitive of the two, are double sealed due to the manner in which each country approaches axolotl transport. There's also a difference in how they secure the axolotl inside. In Britain, the container is filled with just enough water to cover the axolotl, thus making it harder for the little guy to get tossed around. And the fuller containers of American transport methods means that you can do this in theory, but it's not recommended. One of the biggest concerns for Americans transporting axolotls, aside from being forced to eat mushy peas during rest stops, is the Great British-American temperature divide. In Britain, residential tap water is categorized as slightly cooler, while it's generally warmer in the US. Moreover, British axolotl tanks operate on a 50% water change frequency and America on 25%. What does all of this mean? Well, let's just say that you want to use your American axolotl transport methods in Britain, but it doesn't run on cooler temperatures, or is not dual climate, or is incompatible with 50% water changes. In that instance, you'll need to run to Tesco to pick up some ice packs. An ice pack will convert the temperature from warm to the temperature your axolotl needs. In the event that your ice pack doesn't come with a Type G container adapter, be sure to also pick up one of these. This container adapter is magic. It allows you to turn your Type A or B American container into a Type G British container. For Brits visiting America, the same applies, but in reverse. A temperature regulator might also be needed to safely transport axolotls in the US. Both are widely available for Americans and Brits on Amazon. I'd say the most obvious difference between British and American axolotl transport is the duration. When I first transported an axolotl in America, I couldn't believe how long it took, and not in a Morgan Freeman type way. I mean, this was a cross-country move. I just mean it was time-consuming. But in Britain, you don't usually have that problem and or luxury because a significant amount of British axolotl transport is either not long distance or not long distance well. This is a particular problem when you're squished in a car with your future in-laws and an axolotl. As with many areas of life, axolotl transport is its own subgenre of British versus American word differences. Take, for instance, the name that we assign to that helpful pet store staff member who helps you with your axolotl when you're buying or transporting. In Britain and much of the rest of the world, this person is known as an aquatic specialist. This is the word we use for what Americans might call a fish guy or an axolotl expert. Also, whether it's situated on the ground or the first floor, Brits and Americans also can't agree on what you call that area of the pet store that you enter. Upon entering Britain, we usually opt for the word shop floor. Please note that Americans, just like patrons on my most recent secret stream, are divided on whether this should be pronounced floor or floor. Either way, Americans will often call this area the sales floor. More often than not, Brits will call an axolotl transport container a travel tank. Americans will call a travel tank a critter keeper, while Americans have about 100 words for an axolotl. Chief among these are water puppy, Mexican walking fish, water dragon, and smiling salamander, and finally axolotl sitting. This is something I've encountered far more in the United States than I have in Britain. This is a pet sitting service offered at pet stores in which you pay a specialist to care for your axolotl while you're away. But the use of axolotl sitting might be confusing to some Brits. You might think of an axolotl sitter, often pronounced axolotl minder, as a professional amphibian caretaker, a fine example of which is the character of Newt Scamander from J.K. Rowling's Fantastic Beasts novels that I somehow keep mentioning in my videos just by coincidence. That's it for this video. Let me know in the comments below some of the axolotl transport differences that you've encountered. I'm Sarah Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. Thank you to my patrons for literally making this video happen. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so today at patreon.com/LostInThePond. Until the next video, goodbye.